even if you don't believe the Bible. World circumstances are now bearing out exactly what it predicts will happen. Either the prophets are prophets or they are perfect guessers. The call for a unified Islamic coalition ruled by an Islamic dictator is now quickly becoming a reality. On September 17, 2005, the Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad addressed the United Nations National Assembly in New York City. He concluded with his speech with the following declaration and prayer, quote, "From the beginning of time, humanity has longed for the day when justice, peace, equality, and compassion envelop the world. All of us can contribute to the establishment of such a world. When the day comes, the ultimate promise of all divine religions will be fulfilled with the emergence of a peaceful human being who is higher to all prophets and pious men. He will lead the world to justice and absolute peace. Almighty Lord, I pray to you to hasten the emergence of your last repository, the promised one, the perfect and pure human being, the one that will fill the world with justice and peace." Think about this. Before the United Nations National Assembly in the heart of New York City, the president of Iran called out to his God to hasten the emergence of the Mahdi, one that would ultimately cause the religion of Islam to rule over the earth and destroy all those who refuse to submit. When has this ever happened? Western reporters scrambled to identify this mysterious Al-Mahdi and found him in the ancient sources of both Shia and Sunni Holy Writ. The West finally had their first introduction to Islam's awaited Messiah. On November 16, 2005, Ahmadinejad, like a Muslim John the Baptist, exhorted crowds in Tehran to pave the way, proclaiming that his main mission as the president of Iran is to prove the path for the glorious reappearance of the Imam Mahdi. May Allah hasten his reappearance. As if that is not astonishing enough, according to Ahmadinejad, this Mahdi will arrive in the next 2 years. The personal relationship with this Muslim Messiah goes beyond announcing his soon coming. Ahmadinejad even claims to converse with this Mahdi. If one thinks this is an anomaly, think again. Iranian leaders set up an institute in 2004 for the study and dissemination of information about the Mahdi. It is fully staffed and even produces children's magazines to influence the younger generation, a Hitler-style youth brainwashing of masses who awaits the Grand Imam and Islam's supreme ruler and Messiah. With weapons of mass destruction and a few nuclear bombs, he might even cause lightning to come down from heaven, as the predicted Mahdi will do. One slight adjustment though. However, the carrier of this nuclear-tipped Shahab will be a transit flight lobbed from an ocean liner right over New York City, perhaps. The Shahab, the choice name picked for Iran's missile, literally means lightning. Everything except the completion of his nuclear program is in place, including the reception side of Mahdi. Over $20 million was spent refurbishing the mosque in Jamkaran, just outside the holy city of Qum. It is ready for the grand finale. The countdown has begun. From the birth pangs of the Holocaust, Israel was born. Why is it every time I speak to a secular audience about Israel, Muslims tell me the birth of Israel was a self-fulfilled prophecy? Did the Jews drag 6 million to their death in order to accomplish such a thing? What does one think about Iran's Hujjatiyya society? Considered by mainstream Shia Muslims to be the lunatic fringe. The Hujjatiyya society is governed by the conviction that the 12th Imam's return can be hastened by the creation of a period of chaos on earth which they must fulfill. The group is so extreme that even the late hardliner Ayatollah Khomeini banned them in 1983. This is the same Khomeini who, when asked by a companion how he wanted the Ministry of Justice restructured, replied, quote, Anyone who is against me is against Allah and must be killed where they stand. No other justice system is required. It is easy to understand why so many claim that Ahmadinejad is a member of Hujjatiyya. Ahmadinejad's mentor and spiritual advisor, Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, is considered by many to presently be the highest ranking member of the Hujjatiyya society. But it is the defining element of the Hujjatiyya society that has so many concerned. As stated, Hujjatiyya believes that the Mahdi's return will be preceded by world chaos, war, bloodshed throughout the earth. After this cataclysmic confrontation between forces of good and evil, the Mahdi will lead the world to an era of universal peace. The danger present with this volatile combination of beliefs has not been articulated any better than by former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who described Hujjatiyya this way. I was looking for an analogy to try to explain to Americans what it is that is so dangerous about Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. You remember those crazy people in Waco, Texas? Imagine David Koresh with nuclear weapons. Imagine David Koresh not with hundreds of followers, but millions of followers with nuclear weapons, wanting to obliterate America, wanting to obliterate America's allies, wanting to take over the world's oil supply. If a lunatic escaped from this asylum, that is one thing. However, if they can get their hands on a nuclear weapon, that is another matter. This is that kind of cult. It's a cult of the Mahdi. In truth, no one should view Ahmadinejad as a John the Baptist paving the way for Messiah. A more fitting parallel is Judas Iscariot, the zealot who many speculate attempted to force Jesus to take his throne as king of Israel by betraying him. The Hujjatiyya are to the Muslim world what some Jewish zealots were to first century Jews. They believe they can manipulate Allah and force the Mahdi to appear. Or perhaps Allah will find a better candidate with more manipulating charisma to be his right arm. But among those monitoring Iran's Mahdi obsession, few point out the spread of this infestation in the neighboring Iraq, in not only the Shia strain, but also the Sunni. In January of 2007, American troops in Iraq, like pest control, fighting from one area to the other, killed Ahmad Hasni al-Yamini, a man who had claimed to be the Mahdi. Hasni was a leader of the group known as the Jaish al-Jannah, Army of the Heaven, and had gathered between 600 and 700 followers, including many Sunni Muslims, recruits from ranks of Al-Qaeda. But Jaish al-Jannah is not the only Mahdist group that has recently emerged in Iraq. In fact, according to Ziad Qasim, a monitor of key Arabic websites in Iraq, Jaish al-Jannah is only the tip of the iceberg. According to Ziad, there are now at least 7 different Mahdist sects in Iraq, each one believing that the return of the Mahdi is imminent. Even in the 19th century in Algeria, several individuals claimed to be the forerunner of the Mahdi. Jesus made it clear that in the last days, many deceivers would emerge claiming to be the Messiah or a prophet and leading many people astray. As we look at the present explosion throughout the Muslim world of Islamic Messianism, all believers should realize that this is a clear sign that we are now approaching the end times. It's not only a call for Mahdi, but a revival of a caliphate as well. Muslims regard themselves as members of one ummah, a community, Muslim believers of the whole world. This concept dominates the Muslim world. The sense of community and loyalty to Muhammad and Allah even trumps family and other social ties, giving reason as to why many Muslims do not hesitate to kill even family members who give up the Islamic faith. Add to this the simple fact that the Islamic sacred traditions are filled with prophecies foretelling the triumph of Islam over the whole world. The eventual conquest and complete Islamization of the earth is as natural an expectation for most Muslims as the rising of the sun. Muslims have sense of entitlement, feeling as if world dominion is simply their destiny. Therefore, for the past 80 plus years, since the actual abolition of the caliphate, the Muslim believer has felt a deep disorder in the power balance of the world. Rather than united Islamic empire under the caliph, the Islamic world has existed as a network of underachieving and defeated nation states. They see the modern Muslim states in the Middle East as a product of evil of the Western powers. Despite being secular states, Muslims often see them as Christian nations who divide the Islamic caliphate. At the same time, too often, they are ruled by corrupt third-rate dictators who live in luxury while their people live in poverty. In February of 2006, Sheikh Ismail Nawahde of Guiding Helper Foundation preached to the gathering of Muslims on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. He called upon them to restore the caliphate, or as he explained, genuine Islamic rule, which would unite the Muslims in the war against the infidels, close quote. And only a few months later, Sheikh Ra'ad Salah of the Islamic movement in Israel, addressing over 50,000 Muslims just outside Israeli city of Haifa, declared, quote, Jerusalem will soon be the capital of a Muslim Arab caliphate, and all efforts by the Israeli establishment to Judaize the city will amount to nothing. Soon, Jerusalem will be the capital of the new Muslim caliphate, and the caliph's seat will be there. Astonishing. Many surveys show that since the US-led invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, Muslims almost universally have seen the war against terrorism as a war on Islam. Muslims regard themselves as members of the Ummah, or community of believers, that forms the heart of Islam. As the earthly head of this community, the Caliph is cherished both as memory and ideal. The Caliphate is still esteemed by many ordinary Muslims. The University of Maryland conducted a face-to-face survey of 4,384 Muslims between December 9, 2006 and February 15, 2007. 1,000 Moroccans, 1,000 Egyptians, 1,243 Pakistanis, 1,141 Indonesians. Andrew Bostom, author of The Legacy of Jihad and an expert on Islamic Jihad, commented on the results. 65.2% of those interviewed, almost two-thirds, hardly a fringe minority, desired this outcome, to unify all Islamic countries into a single Islamic state or caliphate, including 49% of moderate Indonesian Muslims. 65.5% of this Muslim sample approved proposition to require a strict application of Sharia laws in every Islamic country. How many times have you heard that most of Muslims of the world are moderate and are not a threat to the West? How many times have you heard that we only need to worry about a small minority here? Does a two-thirds sound like a small minority to you? It is time to get real. The Caliphate confers legitimacy to the jihad. According to Islamic law, without a Caliphate, it is not possible to declare a genuinely sanctioned pan-Islamic jihad. Similar to the need for the President of the United States to declare a state of war, it is also necessary for a Caliph to be in office for any official pan-Islamic jihad to be declared. This is why many Muslims condemn terrorism, since we don't have the Caliphate established yet. But once a Caliphate is in office, it is actually law for him to engage the non-Muslim world in war in order to spread Islam. This is not to say that Muslims have not conducted jihad against non-Muslims, but these have largely been the acts of small groups of individuals. In other words, jihad under a caliph would be genuine, fulfilling the call for the Prophet of Islam. The Prophet of Islam declared, I have been ordered to fight all nations, till everyone say, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. And so we have the convergence of numerous geopolitical realities, Bible prophecy, Muslim end-time beliefs, and even American intelligence, all pointing to the same conclusions, all confirming the many prophecies that were made in the Bible thousands of years ago. Now is the time for believers everywhere to prepare both their hearts and their affairs. It is time to get your house in order, and if you are a non-believer, now is the time to reconsider your position. Now we will see that coalition of Ezekiel 38 is forming right before our eyes. New developments seem to fall into place daily. In this section, we will show some of the latest events that significantly supports the prophecy of Ezekiel 38. From this prophecy, we know that among the specific nations that will be part of the Antichrist 10-nation coalition are Turkey, Iran, Sudan, Syria, and Libya. Many other nations will also submit or fall to the Antichrist, but the exact order of these events we cannot be sure. Through several of the other prophecies, we know that Lebanon and the Palestinian territories will be involved as well. With Sudan, we could also see Somalia as part of the coalition. Several Central Asian states are likely, such as Afghanistan, Pakistan. With Libya, we could also see other North Africa nations involved like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, etc. Along with Turkey, we could also see the Turkic nations south of Russia, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and others. But for now, we will stick only with the nations that we are clearly presented within the Gog-Magog prophecy: Iran, Syria, Libya, Sudan, and Turkey. Analysts now nearly all agree that perhaps the most significant unintended consequence of America's war in Iraq and the toppling of Saddam Hussein is that the majority of Shia Muslims of Iraq, those who were significantly suppressed under Saddam's regime, have arisen to a great political power in Iraq. And the ripple effect this has caused is significantly changing the balance of power in the Middle East. One of the most basic elements of Middle East politics that one needs to understand is the power balance between the Sunni and the Shia nations. For the past 50 years, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been the top dog oil-producing nation in the Middle East. Not only that Saudi Arabia clearly is a top oil producer, but she also has the greatest global percentage of readily available oil reserves. Simply put, whoever has the oil has the money and the power. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is also a Sunni Muslim nation. Now standing on the other side of the ring, just across the Persian Gulf, is Iran. Iran is the second greatest oil producer in the region and is far and away the Shia stronghold of the earth. Since late 1970s, when the Iranian Revolution began, Iran has been struggling to cast itself as the greatest and most powerful Muslim nation in the world. So remember this. In the power struggle between the Shia and the Sunni worlds, it is Saudi Arabia and Iran who stand at odds. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Iran represent leaders of the two power blocks, the Sunni and the Shia blocks. While not all Muslim nations are so deeply concerned about these sectarian divisions, within the Middle East proper, this power struggle is everything seconded only by the greater Muslim world's hatred for Israel and the West. It is for this reason that the nations of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan have emerged as partners in their resistance to the growing power of what is now being called the Shia Crescent. With this background set, we can now move on to see which nations are taking which side and why. While many would assume that those nations that are Sunni would join Sunni alliance and the Shia would join Iran, it is not that simple. Instead, many Muslim nations are siding up according to which nations are perceived as friendly to the West and Israel versus those nations that have assumed a more Islamist and radical disposition. So on one side, we have a primarily Sunni and so-called moderate Western-friendly coalition, and on the other side is a divided Shia-Sunni coalition that's staunchly anti-West and far from moderate. This divided Sunni-Shia dimension to the emerging Islamist coalition fits perfectly in line with what we are expecting to see with regard to the final Antichrist coalition, in that the kingdom will be divided, Daniel 2:41. In light of the various blatantly anti-Semitic statements and threats that are made regularly by leaders throughout the Middle East, one cannot help but view such an optimistic outlook as being ridiculously naive, as Palestinian leaders regularly claim that Islam commands to destroy Israel and that they will never accept a peace with the Jews. In the past, like Olmert and others like him, still believe that peace with the Palestinian people is possible. This is in 1938 all over again. I remind you of Neville Chamberlain's now infamous declarations of optimism regarding the peace agreement that he had established with Adolf Hitler. On September 30th, 1938, the newspaper read as follows: Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain arrived back in the UK today holding an agreement signed by Adolf Hitler, which states that German leaders desire never to go to war with Britain again. Mr. Chamberlain declared that accord with the German side, peace for our time. After he had read to the jubilant crowd gathered at Heston Airport in West London, the German leader stated in the agreement, "We are determined to continue our efforts to remove possible sources of difference and thus to contribute to assure the peace of Europe." Likewise, and even more frightening, is the Apostle Paul's warning to the church regarding Christ's return. Quote, "Now, brothers, about times and the dates we do not need to write to you, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape." 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 to 3. But beyond the fact that the Saudi initiative peace deal is truly a joke, it is also not really even an Arab peace deal at all, rather a plan set forth by the leaders of the Sunni nations who are trying to protect their own power while isolating Iran, Syria, and any other nations that do not wish to bow to the Saudi power bloc. As a result, this peace plan has actually caused Ezekiel's coalition of radical nations to continue strengthening their ties. It has been almost eerie to watch as it unfolds. After examining all of the various reasons biblically for seeing the soon coming emergence of a radical Islamic empire, in fact, nearly every statistic is pointing to this very direction. And thus the world that we live in is daily creeping closer and closer to perfectly reflecting that world of which the Bible prophesied thousands of years ago when it spoke of the end times. The time is shorter than most think. Let us hasten, therefore, to the work